Let me just first say thank you all for having me. I'm the president and CEO of Boys and Girls Clubs of Dane County. So let me just share with you a little bit about myself, and I'm going to talk about the work that we're doing at Boys and Girls Clubs and the impact that our work is having collectively in the community, and how I can believe individuals like yourselves and other people in our community can engage to support young people with families in need in Dane County. So you're looking at someone, I just turned 40 last week, so you're looking at someone who has been doing this work for 20 years. I grew up in a neighborhood that was infested with gangs, drugs, prostitution, and two public housing developments. A housing development by the name of Cabrini Green and one called the Abla Homes. And this was a neighborhood that that I grew up in that just didn't have a lot of hope and inspiration for young people. And it didn't hit me until I was working at Chicago Public Schools at 21 years of age. I got a job where the school superintendent hired me. And my eighth grade graduation, my eighth grade teacher or principal asked if I would come back to the school to give a commencement speech. So I had never given a big speech like that in my life. I was excited about talking to these young people. So I walked into the building. I had 27 pages of notes that I wanted to talk to these young people about. But when I walked in that building, they still had my eighth grade graduation picture on the wall. And at that time I was about your size. I had just about as much hair as you did. And I was like, what happened? It all fell out. And but I had to change my conversation, because out of the 23 young men that had graduated with me, as of today, only 4 of us are still alive. So we asked ourselves, why did God give us grace? And why were we still here compared to our other friends? And there was 4 things that were instrumental in our lives. 1, we all came from single-family households, so our mothers were a force to be reckoned with. 2, we were all members of after-school programs like the Boys and Girls Clubs. 3, we all had mentors that were instrumental in our lives that made a key difference. And then 4, we all came from, we were all connected to a community of faith. So we all had dinner that night, and I decided at that very moment that I would dedicate the rest of my life helping young people read and write and be prepared for college and careers. So for somebody like me, I think the reason I stand before you today is because that mentor that was involved in my life. So I think about, when we think about young people, I had a couple of connections that helped me not fall through this net. And a lot of times what young people want love, they want to be connected, they want this sense of belonging. And that's why some young people join gangs. Gangs give them a sense of belonging. So what Peter Goshen did for me, Peter was a Greek American business owner who owned a grocery store in my neighborhood. And I remember my mother was on Social Security, and we were struggling financially. So at 13, I wanted to be the man of the house, and I wanted to bring in some sort of income. So I went and got my Sunday church suit. It was the only suit I had. It was bright white. I asked my neighbor for his briefcase, and I saw that the owner of the store had a clerk position open. So at 13, I walked in, and I said, I'm here for the clerk job. And he looked at me and he died laughing. And he introduced me to his wife, and he said, kid, you're hired, but don't ever wear that suit to the store again. So I've been working since I was 13. So Pete became my surrogate father. Pete said, your responsibility is school, to stay out of trouble. So even though I stayed in the projects, I would leave every morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I wouldn't come home till 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. So even though I lived in that environment, I didn't live in the environment. And so what Peter did, Peter changed my frame of thinking. Peter said, well, no one in my family had ever been to college. No one in my family ever had a really good job. So my career aspiration was to get a unionized job as a cafeteria worker or janitor at a school. There's nothing wrong with those professions, but that was my dream. So Peter said, no, let me expose you. You are college material. Let's go on a couple of college tours. And I remember 18 years old, I had never left the project center in my life. Takes me to what I thought was Disney World at the time, the campus of Terre Haute, Indiana State University. Now, have you ever been to Terre Haute? I look at it now, it ain't really all that great. But when I walked through there, what I saw was great campus, dorms, and so I had never seen anything like that, so the light bulb started going off, and I started thinking about college. So what Pete did was provided inspiration. And that's what a lot of our young people need, particularly young people who come from disadvantaged communities. And I don't like to call, like in my organization, we don't use words like disadvantage or serve. We want to inspire, we want to empower, and we want to connect young people to positive adults. So I've spent the last 20 years working in Chicago Public Schools, Philadelphia Public Schools. I worked for the mayor of Philly, running Parks and Recreation. And 6 years ago, I took over Boys and Girls Clubs of Dane County, right here in Madison, Wisconsin. So people say, well, Mike, why would you go to Madison, Wisconsin, after being a commissioner for a large urban city over one of the largest parks and recreation departments in the country? So on the outside looking in, it was actually great. You know, you had a car, driver, big corner office with a great view, you know, TV all the time, and people call you Commissioner Johnson. You know, it's pretty cool. But even though I was a commissioner, I never got to spend time with kids. I was dealing with budget people, policy people, dealing with neighborhood groups. I didn't feel a sense of connection to any one community. So I missed working. I started my career at Boys and Girls Club and at 20 years old. And so as a volunteer, and I said, I'm gonna run a Boys and Girls Club organization one day. So this organization did a national search. I didn't know anything about Madison, Wisconsin. I thought it was only cows, cheese, and farms here. So Mary Burke, who's the president of the board at the time, led a national search. Over 200 people applied. I met with Mary, and I was impressed the fact that she was emailing me 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, trying to recruit me to come to this city. So I get here and I learn about all the challenges that this community has faced. So whether it be around the achievement gap of African American and Latino kids, the issues that white poor kids face in this community, when you look at the disparity gap around unemployment in this community, and then when you look at issues around mass incarceration, those are real issues that our community is facing. And so I believe that as a country, we have to invest more resources in young people, but resources that's going to get the type of return on our investment that's going to move the needle for them. So we decided, I came out and said, we'll go big, bold, or I go home. So I don't want to come into a community where we're not moving the needle for kids. So 5 years ago or 6 years ago when I came, I said, we're going to quadruple the size of this organization. We're going to make sure that our kids have the financial resources that we have, that our Boys and Girls Clubs are going to look like country clubs in the hood, that we're going to put hundreds of tutors in classrooms working with kids during the school day. And we're going to put thousands of kids to work, introducing them to careers in the community to inspire them to want to become productive, reliant adults. And I'll tell you, 6 years ago it was all on paper. Today it's happening. So let me share with you what those results are. So when I came to Boys and Girls Clubs, our facilities, some of you all just toured it, was dark, dirty, and gloomy. You walk in there now, it's one of the best community centers probably in the state for a facility of its age and size. State-of-the-art music studio, brand new gym floor, the only youth credit union in the world right here in South Madison, created right at your local Boys and Girls Clubs. Those are the kind of experiences that we want for our kids. So then we had to create, and this is where nonprofits struggle. We had to create a business plan. So all my degrees are in business. I have an MBA, a master's in business, a bachelor's degree, a bachelor's in business. So as I was moving up the ranks, working for city government, I worked during the day, went to school at night. So there's two ways that nonprofit leaders fail. Actually, three. One, they don't know how to raise money, so they can't raise the capital that they need to grow the infrastructures to support the constituents that they're responsible for serving. Two, they struggle with board development and bringing on the right board members to support the work that they bring on. And three, hiring and managing their volunteer base and developing plans to ensure that outcomes are being achieved. So in our organization, we said that we had one big hole. And if you Google it, people laughed at me. People said, oh, that's not going to happen. So we created what we call a BHAG, which is an acronym for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. One goal. 90%, and the goal is 90% of our kids will graduate from high school and be prepared for college and or careers. And I remember the State Journal put it on the front page and the phone calls I got. And I said, we will raise $15 million. And people were like, $15 million is not enough money. There's no, one, you won't raise it in this community. Two, $15 million is not going to get you the kind of results that you're looking for, because school districts who got $200 million budgets and $300 million budgets won't even make those kinds of claims. I said, well, we're going to make it. And so you do your research. Matter of fact, next week, the University of Wisconsin is coming out with a study. Every year, they study the kids that's in our program, our kids' GPA. And these are kids who traditionally do not do well in school, the demographics that we're serving. Kids who GPAs are higher, their attendance is better, they're taking more rigorous courses, and at the end of the day, they're graduating from high school and going to college. All 113 of my kids are in college this semester. Now, we also realize in America that every kid won't get a college degree. So we said, okay, in America, only 30% of working age adults actually have a college degree. So we want our kids to be prepared and ready, but we also want to expose them to careers. There's 5,400 plus businesses in Dane County. 5,400. And so when you look at the racial disparities in unemployment, there's about a 20-point gap between African Americans and our white counterparts. So begin to employ young people in this community. So you asked, I went to Chicago. I love my podium, by the way. I went to Chicago and about a year ago, and they asked me to address 450 African American boys. And I was going to talk to these kids about college and careers. So I'm on social media, use it on a regular basis. So I see that a young lady that I had graduated with, her son was stabbed to death right in front of the school the day before I was due to speak. So I said, it reminded me of that first speech I was about to give at the elementary school that I graduated from. So I asked these young men, I said, what do you want to be when you grow up? 95%, actually I would say probably 99% of the kids raised their hand and said NBA or NFL. So for me, those kids reminded me of me. What I saw was an African-American janitor, African-Americans working in the kitchen at our schools, and said, those are union jobs, pay well. That was my aspiration. Kids see LeBron James on TV. They see the NFL games on TV. But the careers that you all were in or are in, they don't see those careers. So they don't aspire to be it. So what I shared with these young people, I said, I would never suppress your dreams, but let me share with you what the facts are. The facts are 1.5 million kids play high school football and basketball. At the collegiate level, I just gave a talk to the I welcomed the Rutgers University football team here last week when they came to Madison, because they had a lot of issues with some of their players breaking into people's houses and getting in trouble. And I was talking to them about winning in life. And sometimes winning on the field is okay, but if you're losing in life, you're disgracing yourself and your family. So at the collegiate level, there's only 87,000 positions that's available. Then on NBA and NFL draft day, there's only 303 jobs. And if you're one of the lucky 303, your career span is only going to be 4 years. So by the time you're 25, you may be rich, but you're going to be unemployed, which means now you have these resources. And how do you make sure you don't blow $100 million like some NBA, NFL players have done? In fact, there's studies that have shown that majority of NFL players are broke within 10 years. So regardless of your dreams to play football or basketball, you should always be preparing for a career. So, and that's why internships, for me, are so important for our kids. So for me, I had Peter, who provided inspiration. I had, in my case, I had a real job. So I worked 30 hours a week. That kept me busy and kept me out of trouble. And even though it was a grocery store, I learned some great skills, soft skills, customer service skills, how to manage cash flow and inventory. I learned that at a very early age. So you got a mentor, you got internships. The other piece is the investment. So it's the dollar. You know, I talked about this earlier. You know, if you think small, you operate small. There's no margin, there's no mission. And so a lot of times people criticize nonprofits when they say they want a profit. Let me tell you, you know, if you want to get a Boys and Girls Club, great, but I will tell you, I want a profit for my organization, because what profits does for nonprofits, the only difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit is that for-profits, board members and shareholders are paid, and on the nonprofit side, you can make a profit, but that profit typically would go into an endowment to help sustain the organization in the long run. So a lot of times I think we're afraid and we don't have the capacity to build relationships to help raise money for our young people. So we have tried to do all kinds of creative things to raise money. One, almost $400 billion was given to 1.5 million nonprofits last year. 4 out of 5 philanthropic dollars come from people like you, individual gifts. And a lot of times, my nonprofit counterpart, they focus on corporations, and getting big gifts are great, but you get a $100,000 grant 1 year, and then the next year is gone. Now you've done a disservice to the community because you started a program that you can't finish. So individual giving should always be the heart of what an organization can do. So we've really ramped that up in my organization. We went from about 2,500 donors to about 37,000 donors. So those $5 and $6 checks, you multiply, it adds up. And it's sustainable income if you can retain and engage your donors. We've also done creative things around working cause marketing. So unfortunately, yesterday you heard the news about Oscar Mayer leaving our city. So we had just signed an agreement with them. Now, I don't know if that agreement would last, but we're 2 years into $1 million agreement that we signed with them, that every Lunchable that you buy, a percentage of that comes to not only my Boys and Girls Clubs, but I negotiated a deal to support 4,000 Boys and Girls Clubs across the country. So we did the same thing with Fiskars. It said you can put the Boys and Girls Club logo on your scissors, and we can demonstrate that by our brand that you're supporting thousands of kids across the country, that is good business for your organization. So we've done multiple deals like that. We've worked with PDQ gas stations where for 4 weeks, they simply ask people, donate $1 to Boys and Girls Clubs. That bring in tens of thousands of dollars into our organization. There's a company called Van Houten Pickles, who will sell 1.7 million pickles in the next 3 years. Our logo is going to be on all of the pickles starting in January 2016. And that'll bring in resources to the Boys and Girls Clubs. And so we do special events. Special events can be great, but they also can be a curse. Some organizations spend too much time on special events. So my agency, we went from doing about 4 or 5 special events down to 2. And we do 2 really, really well. So our 2 special events went from about $180,000 a year to about $800,000 a year. And so we decided that we're not going to become dependent on government resources. Not saying that we won't take them. We don't want our programs 100% funded by anybody. Because if you're funded by one source, if that source go away, you do damage to the kids or the families or the seniors or whoever your constituents are. You will hurt them in the long run if you don't diversify your funding streams. And then the last piece I would say is, I would call it the village. It's the people, the human capital, right? And my penmanship is terrible. So Boys and Girls Club has grown from about a $1.4 million agency, and we'll be $5 million next year. Now, we've done that in 5 years. Now, it wasn't that Michael Johnson was such a great leader. I know how to bring people together. I know how to put together business plans, and you utilize the human capital of your community to become great ambassadors for your organization. So I'll give a couple examples. We just gave a $100,000 scholarship for a young Latino woman to go to college for free. One donor, and this is how this connection was made. So we had a volunteer who I had reached out to 3-4 years ago, the CEO of Fiskars, gave him a tour. So his company renovated our arts room. He was having dinner with one of his neighbors and said, you know, this is a big developer in town. And he said, you know, me and my wife could be doing more. And my kids are grown. I hear about how the Boys and Girls Clubs are helping kids graduate from high school and go to college. He calls me on a Saturday morning and said, I want to give $100,000 away in scholarships. I was like, that's awesome. And he said, no, not plural, scholarship. I said, what? He said, one scholarship, one student. Michael, let me know who the student is. I said, you gonna put that kind of pressure on me? And so I said, how about we do this? I'll put together a committee, a diverse committee of community leaders. So we put together this group of about 17 leaders between the ages of 17 to 81. And we did a competitive process. So this young lady from West High School won. She is 17. Her name is Christabel Martinez. Both her parents were on disability, and she's been working 2 jobs for the last 2 years. She has a 3.5 GPA, and she won. And now she's going to UW-Madison, and she would graduate from college debt-free. And so if my volunteer didn't make that connection with his neighbor, guess what? Christabel probably would not have the resources, or she would have had to take out $100,000 in loans. So her tuition would be paid, her room and board would be paid, books would be paid, $100,000. What was great about this donor said, I don't want to just give the check. Mike, we want to treat her like a surrogate daughter. So let's have dinner and let's begin to make that personal connection. They just sent me a check for $2,000 saying, hey, Mike, she need a new Apple laptop. That's what we got our kids when we were in college, when they were in college. So human capital is important because a lot of times nonprofit leaders and even nonprofit boards, people get burnt out because they're trying to do all this work by themselves. So we've tried to build an army of volunteers that can support our 5,000 kids. And I'm not ashamed to add staff. Some people will say, you gotta watch your overhead. So this is crap. It's like, here's the deal. You know, when I go over to some of these Fortune 200, 300, 500 companies, they have VPs of sales and VPs of marketing VPs of research and development. Why can't nonprofits have that? So they can help grow their scale. And so there's real disparities in the marketplace and biases when it comes to stuff like that. So we've grown our capacity where I've hired some VPs, and I said, look, at the end of the day, I got to make sure that I got a workforce that's out there raising money for our kids, a workforce that are helping our kids graduate from college and going to high school and finding careers. And you need people to be able to do that. And we should never apologize for doing that. Now, as a nonprofit, you got to demonstrate that you're being good stewards of those dollars, and we do that. And that's when we talk about impact. But at the end of the day, in order to get impact, I believe you have to have infrastructure. You got to have a strong volunteer base. You got to deliver on your promise. And if you do those things the right way, that's when you begin to change some of the racial disparities in our community. So I'm only touching about 10% of the kids in the Madison School District. So imagine if I think we have about 120 tutors and staff that work in the schools. So imagine if I was able to raise $30 million and put more tutors in classrooms with teachers. We're now expanding it to Verona High School, and we're helping them. So the resources are important. The volunteers are important. Having a strong board and management team is important, and having donors who are connected to your mission. And you have to be able to. I'm bringing the former president of Microsoft here in January. He was the guy who created the Xbox. So I met him in Seattle. I said, I want you to come and talk to some of our students here in Madison. And one of the things that his name is Robbie Bott, he said, Mike, every organization should be thinking about their North Star. So I talk about BHAG. He's like, BHAGs are great, but like, what's your North Star? Not for your agency, but for the community. And if you could talk about what the economic impact is that will not only benefit your organization, but the community, that's when transformation happens. So for us, we've been able to tell the community, here's what the economic impact of that $15 million. For every young person that do not graduate from high school in this community will become dependent on public resources, and you and I, as taxpayers, will pay. And this is a study done by UCLA, look it up. You and I will pay $200,000 per young person over their lifetime because they will become dependent on public resources, or they'll be incarcerated. And as a country, we have become the #1 jailer in the world. We invest $44,000 a year to incarcerate an inmate, but we spend less than $5,000 a year to educate a child. Something wrong with that. So we have to change our funding equation for young people, and we have to change the opportunity equation for young people. I think there are opportunities for our young people if we invest in them. If we these young people are smart. I think about Scott Resnick, who ran for mayor here in town. Here's a guy who I met with last week, told me he started his company at 21 years of age. No, I'm sorry, 20. He was at UW-Madison, him and some of his college roommates. And now, if any one of you all like have a Cadillac or something like that, he makes all of the software navigation systems for Cadillac. So, we invest in these young people. I just met a young man in this community who started his own cleaning business. And here's what's unique about his business. There's a lot of cleaners. What makes you so special? He said the difference between my business and the regular cleaners, you never have to leave your house. I have a concierge service where I'll come to your house, pick up your clothes, clean them, and have it back to you guaranteed within 48 hours. So we just got a dream for our kids, invest in them, create the right infrastructure, and we can change some of the disparities that happen in this community. And we need strong leadership, and we got to diversify our leadership. I guarantee you, I wrote an op-ed piece on this. Diversity is key. My organization has the most diversity probably of any organization in Dane County. When you look at my organization, black, white, young, old, Filipino, Latino, different races, different cultures, because diversity is a great equalizer. Diversity brings fresh ideas. You'll see men and women on our staff, and sometimes we hire people who we're comfortable with. If you think about it, some companies, some may be ran by women, all women on their leadership team. Maybe ran by men, all men on their leadership team. Or it may be a white person, all white people. Or maybe an African American, all black people. And so we have to diversify and be willing to hear from others. And that's how we grow. That's how we grow as a community. So over the last 5 years, and I'll conclude on this, I've tried to, some people say, well, you only run the Boys and Girls Clubs. Why are you getting so involved in some of these other issues? Like when there was an officer involved shooting. Why were you meeting with the police department? Why did you meet with the governor? And people were criticizing me left and right. I said, I don't care what y'all think. At the end of the day, Madison won't become Ferguson. And we're not going to loot. We're not going to turn over cars. So a young man was killed. We're going to support that family. We're going to support police officers. We're going to try to bridge the gap between people in our community. And we'll be one of many agencies that's going to try to be a bridge builder in this community. And sometimes leadership is about being uncomfortable. I am uncomfortable a lot of days in this community. But at the end of the day, we only have so much time on this earth. And while we're on this earth and we make our transition, what will your legacy be? How many lives would you have touched? And at the end of the day, that's what matters to me. And I think that's what has to matter to the nonprofits that do work in our communities. How many lives do they touch? What legacy will they create? And how do they improve the lives of others?